welcome back to another episode of Over the Glass. I am your host, Jay.
Co-host Nessa.
And co-host Drew.
Today we have Avry Lewis-McDougall. McDougall, yes?
That's correct.
Cool. Um, Welcome to the podcast. Would you mind introducing yourself and how you got into hockey?
Oh boy, how many days do you have? That's a long one. I'll try to be concise with the story. But born and raised in Edmonton, Alberta. Fell in love with hockey when I was about 4 or 5 years old, watching the Oilers when he played Dallas Stars back in the late '90s, early 2000s. Whole family enjoyed hockey. I was the lead of watching hockey. From an immigrant family, I was born in Canada. My mom's Trinidadian, dad's Jamaican. And sports has always been a big thing growing up for me to watch, be involved with. Grew up playing sports. Didn't play hockey. Terrible skater. My sports playing were basketball, track and field, lacrosse, tennis, baseball. Those are my sports. Also hockey. Very expensive, and being raised in an immigrant family, at times a single mom, playing hockey wasn't a thing. Like that, no. We're not paying 100 grand if you play hockey. You're playing basketball. You're playing other sports that are more affordable. But grew up watching the Oilers. Went to a couple of games as a kid, and then being a kid who was very passionate about growing up, people always told me, hey, you know a lot about hockey. I was always a big trivia kid. I loved trying to mimic broadcasts and sports because I love doing media side of things. So when I was 15 years old in 2008, this was back when podcasting and blogs were a very new thing. Most people didn't know what a podcast was, what a blog was. That was a foreign word to people in a lot of circles. I started up a sports show called Avery Sports Show using a Nokia flip phone, talking for half an hour, and that really spawned off into me getting more opportunities to talk sports on radio shows, on TV shows, and from there it snowballed to me going to school for broadcasting when I was 19 years old, doing stuff on local TV here in Edmonton, and getting opportunities to do national stuff, talking all kinds of sports. And even though I'm more known for hockey, I've always been very much into every sport there is. I've covered the NFL, I've covered NBA, Major League Baseball, Major League Soccer. I've covered the Pan Am Games. I've never really been one just tie myself in just hockey, but it's sport I'm known for the most. And here I am now covering the NHL for the hockey news. And in the past, had the chance to work with Yahoo Sports Canada, and of course, hosting for a year and a half Game Over Edmonton for SDPN.
What a lovely little resume you've got going on there. And I love that you just kind of, got the passion of watching other broadcasters and you're like, I can do this. I'll do it in my own room. It kind of made me think of like, you're like the Steve Dangle of Alberta.
I've been told that before. I've gotten those comparisons before to what Steve did. 'Cause I have a YouTube channel where I did do the Oiler recaps. And the funny thing is, I know people know Steve for how he looks, how he dresses. One thing with me, people always ask me like, dude, do you have normal clothes? Because every day you're in a suit, you're in a fedora. So like I'll never forget meeting some people to play street hockey, and they're like, "Oh, you don't always wear a suit every single day. You have casual clothes." I'm like, yeah, I have casual clothes. Like I don't go to bed in a suit and a blazer every day.
I wouldn't judge you if you did. I'm sure you could make a great line of pajamas in your style.
So you mentioned you grew up an Oilers fan and are currently an Oilers fan. And I have to ask, because, Drew over here is a Canucks fan, we're Sharks fan, we're all in the Pacific Division, we're technically rivals. And we love to shit on the Oilers. it's just like
Equal opportunists here, not just specifically the Oilers.
right. But with the Oilers, it's like you have the best player in the world, but somehow you can't get very far into the playoffs. And I kind of want to know your opinion on how you feel how the team is going currently, or I guess the thought process, and when you first drafted McDavid into like the hope and like, oh, this is going to be it. We're going to be able to win the Stanley Cup to what it ended up turning out to be.
I would say, well, going back to when they first drafted Connor McDavid, that was during what was known as the Decade of Darkness from 2006 after the Cup final run to 2016 ish. Edmonton had a run of front office staff and GMs who didn't really know what they were doing. There was a lot of incompetence in the front office, but even when they drafted McDavid, under Piucciarelli. Now, granted, Piucciarelli knows how to draft, but building a team around him was a flaw for a long time. The Oilers didn't know how to do. I mean, yes, you had Draisaitl and McDavid, but this team failed to realize you can't build a team solely around two 18-year-olds or two 19-year-olds. You need veterans to help build around these guys, and for a long time, this team failed to do that until recently, where they've got a better top six, better top nine forward core around this guy. They've figured it out more so than in the past. I know the defense has stepped up a little bit more. They've got Evan Bouchard, who might be a Norris candidate come this June. Stuart Skinner has developed into a fine NHL goaltender. But that being said, it shouldn't have taken this long to have had sustained success with McDavid and Draisaitl. You're in year 10 of Leon Draisaitl's career. You're in year 9 of Connor McDavid's career. And to me, that's not a good thing, because look at the other great players who came as generational talents. Alex Ovechkin, Sidney Crosby, Steven Stamkos. Those teams figured things out by year 3, year 4. Edmonton, it took them way longer, and then they started to regress mid-progression. Like, it's a very strange organization, and I do think they're going to figure it out here this season. And I think McDavid will win a cup as an Oiler. I mean, it's going to happen. How could it not eventually? But my big thing has been it's taken too long. It shouldn't be year 9 and McDavid is just now looking at getting into his first cup final. Sidney Crosby, he was in his first cup final, what, by 2007? Like, generational talents, these kind of guys should have been in the cup final well before, or threatening to be there well before 2024.
What are your thoughts in terms of the trade deadline is coming around the corner? Like, what are you hoping that they move? And are there any names out there that you're interested in seeing them acquire?
I think the two big names for Edmonton got to be Chris Tanev and Jake Gensel. Those are two big targets I think Edmonton has to really look at getting. Jake Gensel helps that top Edmonton's 4-9 unit much more so, gives them a little bit more scoring. And Chris Tanev, I know it's very rare to see an Edmonton Calgary trade. In these teams have been in the league for over 40 years. I think there have been maybe 5 trades total between Edmonton and Calgary in 43 seasons. It's rare to get these teams trading with each other. But Chris Tanev is someone who is a solid, rock-solid D-man who will give them more stability, playing with Evan Bouchard, playing with Matthias Ekholm, playing with Darnell Nurse. And in terms of what would go back, I think Edmonton would have to give up maybe a couple of draft picks, possibly Cody Ceci to make it work. And to me, if a Calgary or a Pittsburgh is asking back for draft picks or a high prospect, you know what? If I'm Ken Holland, I go and do that, because you're in the era right now of you want to win now. You can't be planning for 2029, 2030 when that happens, because hey, again, the time to win is now. You can go and draft whenever that time comes. Right now, you want to win a cup right now with McDavid and Draisaitl in their primes. Draft picks 5 years into the future, don't worry about that right now. I don't care about that right now.
Yeah, I find it interesting that Calgary could be willing to trade with the Oilers. I'm just thinking from, here in California, and like we've traded with the Kings and the Ducks before, but they're not impactful players, like game changing type players. Like I remember when we acquired Martin Jones, it was a three-way, and it was pretty much like I forgot who was the original team to acquire him, and it was just like shot right back over to California, for them to get something from us. So like trades do happen, but they end up not being direct. But how do you feel about, okay, like it does sound like you're very positive and optimistic about the future of the Oilers. But I guess I'm curious about what if it doesn't happen in this time frame that McDavid's got a couple years left after this year, and then Dreisaitl's up for a contract after this season. Like, does it depend on if it's an early exit from the playoffs? Like, I guess I'm just trying to get like the like you talking about the GM. It does make sense that he's got to he can't hold on to like these draft picks if there is a potential piece out there that they can acquire. Like the time is them to do it now. But let's say he does go through those motions and it still doesn't happen. Like, I mean, we've got how many teams in this league now? It's like only gotten way more competitive, you know. So I guess your kind of thoughts of like, even if they make the moves that you want them to make, one thing leads to another in the playoffs, and you guys still don't come home with the cup. What do you think the future is when their contracts are set to expire?
Honestly, knowing Connor and Leon a little bit, these guys are two very stubborn guys in the sense that they don't want to leave a thing unless they accomplish a goal. I know people like to make the whole jokes about McDavid's gonna leave, McDavid's gonna leave. Connor's the kind of person in which he's very headstrong, in which if I'm going to accomplish this goal come hell or high water, doesn't matter how long it's gonna take, but there's got to be progress. It can't be another second round exit from the organization, from ownership, Daryl Cates down. It has to be. If we're not winning a cup, we got to at least be in the Final Four and win some games in the Western Conference Final. It can't be going to Western Final and getting swept again like we saw in 2022 against Colorado. You got to be one step away from making it to a cup final. You can't go into year 10 of McDavid's contract and he's been to 0 cup finals. As long as you make that progress and get past round 2, ideally to that cup final, then I think McDavid and Draisaitl will see some more hope. It can't be regression again this year. It absolutely cannot be.
Do you think that there's a possibility of them wanting out if they don't achieve that this year?
Honestly, I don't think so because no team can afford their contracts. No team. People always say make a trade. Like no one can give up enough money for Oilers management to not hang up the phone laughing. There's not enough that you can give back to Edmonton for a trade for McDavid or Draisaitl. Like I know people like to, of course, play fantasy GM with McDavid and Draisaitl with Austin Matthews or with the Mitchell Marner or with somebody else. You're not getting all those guys together. You're trading up your big names to get McDavid or Draisaitl. You're giving up your top tier players to get them. And it's probably going to be a lot of those guys and picks going back the other way. So I just don't see any team making sacrifice to trade to ask for McDavid or Draisaitl in a trade.
I'll trade
I
you
don't
the
even
whole.
think
I was gonna say I'll trade you the whole of the Sharks for a McDavid and Draisaitl.
I just want to say,
And they might say no still.
if Kristanov ends up in Edmonton, I'm gonna scream. I'll just you just catch me shrieking.
you
We
hear
need
if
him.
you hear something, it's true.
We
all
need
the
him
way
back,
from
Avery.
Florida.
Can't have him.
If you got pipes in your house and they just like shake a little bit, that's Drew screaming all
It's
the way
just
from
me.
Florida.
I'll know.
It's my trade deadline yell into the void. What's
I was gonna say I don't even think you could get them if you were just playing fantasy GM. Like that would be nuts.
Right.
Like you'd really have to be playing with like some people that just like do not know what they're doing. Or maybe they're just putting together a team full of all their favorites because those guys would all go in the first round.
Yeah, I love the idea that like people like it's not like hockey ultimate team, right? Like you like these ideas of like, okay, we're gonna keep Nylander and Matthews and Marner and all these guys and then acquire McDavid. It's like no, it's like this isn't the NBA. There's no like super teams here. It's if you're gonna let one of those assets go, you gotta be willing to like sacrifice something of equal measure. It would be nice, it would be fun if we had teams stacked like that, but that's like in the NHL not gonna happen. But it's fun. It's fun to watch people in their fantasy lines. I'm like, yeah, that's a cup winning team for sure. If it ever happened one day, 60 years into the future, when we could do that here.
I don't know if you're going to be realistically putting together a ringer team in the NHL. Like,
Yeah.
especially with this salary cap. Like, there's no way. Like, how much would that be? Like 60% hit on the for your team.
Right. Although, honestly, although I will say as much about salary cap, I would love to see one NBA thing come to the NHL, and that's the bird right rules. Because I believe you should be able to pay as much money as you want to re-sign your star players. If you wanna keep a McDavid and pay him $40 million, go ahead by all means. You should be allowed to do that. I'm not a fan of the NHL's hard salary cap, in which if you're 1 cent over, you're in trouble.
They could put together a GoFundMe. What are your thoughts on Campbell? Because he's got a couple of years left on his contract. He's down in the AHL. Like, are you feeling like you're going to need some backup for Skinner heading into the playoffs? How was it Pickard?
Yes,
Is your
Calvin
backup
Pickard.
right now? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk about goalies right now. So,
Yeah.
and we got a couple. So, just let's broker a trade right now. You've got some juicy first round picks over there.
Jay's the hockey agent in the dark alley. It's like, I hear you need a goalie. I got some fine goalies for you.
I also have a fedora on and a suit.
With a trench coat. So you're like, hey, what do you need? And you open it up.
Yeah, what do you want?
That's
just
quite
got
the
like
imagery.
a couple of like LeBangs just like swinging around there.
Take them all. We don't want them anymore.
Anyways.
Oh man, you know what? With Jack Campbell, I know he's bounced back to an extent in Bakersfield, but just from what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, it sounds more like if any goalie is gonna get recalled from Bakersfield, it's gonna be Olivier Rodrigue before Jack Campbell. So I could see if this team doesn't trade for a goaltender, then more likely going into the playoffs with it being Skinner and Pickard, and the third goalie being Olivier Rodrigue. And it's tough because you did sign Jack Campbell to a massive deal to be your number one franchise goaltender, and I think a lot of people knew that Jack Campbell was always going to be a very hot and cold goaltender last year. No one saw him starting the year as an 870 goaltender. Like, no one had him putting up numbers that hadn't been seen since the mid 60s. Like, that is not good. Like, that is not good. There's a percentage that is struggling to be above 870 as NHL netminder. And it's tough because Jack Campbell, he's the kind of guy in which he gets very down himself. Like, every loss is an emotional thing. Like, he prides himself in wanting to win and wanting to be competent. But in the NHL, this is a league of what have you done for me lately and being consistent. And even though Jack is starting to do that now more so in the AHL, if he's recalled and it's back to the Jack Campbell of October 2023 who can't string together wins, then Magic's going to have to say, you know what? Thanks for your time and effort. We got to move on. And it sounds like that's going to happen, in which, that contract will be bought out before next season.
That sucks, but it's reality.
Yeah, it is.
Anyway, especially for a team like the Oilers, like we've talked about already, like they're in a win now mode. Like the leash is just, if you're dropping far too many games and it's a blowout, like because you guys had a rough start in the beginning, and then all of a sudden you guys were like on a 15 game winning streak. So like and that was kind of happening over the last couple of seasons in similar manners. So I just feel like from the outside looking in, like it's definitely a team where it's like, no, we're not doing that again. And it's like we're not going to give you as much leeway as the last time, because we already experienced what that was like the season before and the season before that. So yeah, it's rough, but just I remember when the trade happened and I was like, ooh, I hope that doesn't, turn south. And, but it's like we've got our own like goaltender history over here in Sharks in Sharks territory. So,
It's not so bad
definitely
right now.
now. Yeah, now. Um but there was something else that I wanted to ask, and now I don't recall. Anyone else have any thoughts, questions about
Concerns.
Oilers?
Concerns. Drew.
I
All right.
I'm always concerned about Edmonton just because they're there and they exist.
Just know that Drew
Just-
cares.
Unwillingly.
Yes, yeah, very unwillingly.
I have a somewhat of a question. How,
Sure.
as a Sharks fan, we obviously had Evander Kane on our team, and
Yes.
everyone saw how that played out. So we're not huge fans of him, but I'm curious to know how he's doing with the fan base over in Edmonton.
I will. When I first heard about Evander coming to Edmonton, I think like many of us up here had our concerns. We have followed Evander's past. We know how things have gone, and it has not been all sunshine and roses. It has been very controversial, and there has been moments where yes, you have every right to be concerned about him coming to this franchise. Now, I will say this much: it's clear that he knows Edmonton was his last chance. There could be no more. There would be no more issues. He knows full well like this was it for him in the NHL. And I will admit, to his credit, he has kept things clean. There has been no issues. But and grant there are people who are still skeptical of it. And you know what? I don't blame you. I don't blame you because Evander Kane has had his missteps, and if you still don't want to rock with him, I don't blame you 100%. There are people who still feel this team should not have acquired him, and on ice, he has 21 goals this year. On his production, it's been hit and miss, but he does his best. Off ice, if you still have concerns about Evander Kane, you know what? Hey, I'm not going to be here to change anybody because yes, he has done things that I do not agree with in many ways, but he knows full well this has been his last chance, and there can be no more missteps on his part, or else I think he's done for good.
He does seem like he's been productive in Edmonton, but it definitely seems like the off ice antics that we've known that surround Evander Kane, it seems like that has gotten more quiet in Edmonton. Like it feels like he is aware, like you said, Avery, like he knows this is his last shot and he's really got to get everything moving in the right directions, both on and off the ice. And I don't know. Do you think that kind of he's surrounded by Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl? Do you think that's a little bit of a sweetener for him to kind of keep things quiet and focus on the game? He's got a chance here with Edmonton, like you said, his last chance in the league, and now he's got some skill players around him. You think that's kind of like a nice incentive for Kane?
I do think so. I do think any player who's coming in with a pass like his wouldn't want to mess up a chance to play with a players like McDavid and Draisaitl, and probably your best chance to win a Stanley Cup. So I think even more so, he knew that hey, I have to be in a straight and narrow because if I mess this up again, this is only going to be on me, and I know it's going to look if I ruin this chance playing with organization that threw me a life draft for what is, let's be honest here, what the fifth, sixth, seventh chance that Evander Kane has had, because we know what's happened before with his time in San Jose, Buffalo, Winnipeg. I mean, we've heard the stories. There have been teammates who've come out and were not fans of him, so he knows that this is a chance I cannot mess up here.
Yeah.
Is it safe to say, so for us here in California,
Mm-hmm.
specifically for the Sharks, we're a smaller market, but in comparison to an Edmonton Oilers, a Vancouver Canucks, just Canada media in general, is it safe to say that if something were to be happening, that the media would be all over it?
I would say that yes, yeah, because hockey players in these kind of markets, like you mentioned, Jay, the Edmontons, Vancouvers, I would say even in America too, like certain markets like say like Buffalo, Detroit, it gets amplified far more because hockey, the NHL is the end all be all. I mean, you see fans going out and about, they see players at the grocery stores, they see players at dinner. So yeah, so I think yeah, in a market like here, if there were to be a misstep in Edmonton, it would absolutely be a story that we put under a magnifying glass in a far bigger way than say if it was in a San Jose or in a Florida or in a Carolina.
Yeah, your media is kind of brutal out there.
It's
I,
hockey
I
for a lot of people hockey is yeah it is the king sport. It's the thing in which it's a front page news in every single market, and even more so say Montreal where you get it in English and French. But I would say I one thing I've learned and I appreciate is that I never speak badly of Sunbelt markets. I think it's insulting to speak down upon the San Jose's, the Arizonas, the Vegases, the Dallases, because all of these markets have had hockey culture for decades upon decades. There's educated fan base in all these places. They don't know less than a fan in Edmonton or Calgary. So I want to welcome all fans from all American markets because I think the idea that you guys know less is I think it's very dumb that American fans or some market fans are less educated or don't know the game. I think that's a very dumb thing to keep spouting out.
Yeah, I'm in
yeah.
a very non-traditional market in Northeast Florida, and we have an ECHL team here, and
Mm-hmm.
our team leads the league in attendance. Has had so consecutively for the last few seasons here, and it also leads 18 other teams in the AHL in attendance. So, I used to live in the Midwest, and like that was a big thing being a hockey fan. But moving back home, and kind of almost approach, I don't want to be like hockey elitist, but that's like a little bit
Mm-hmm.
of like how I felt. I was like, this is a out of place sport and out of place market, but the fans, they're just as dedicated. I mean, the Icemen are an ECHL team, and they're any given day in that arena, you can find a number of fans that are diehard. They know their teams, even if they're thousands of miles away in a different market. Like these people know the sport, and I think it's weird that we've seen such a growth in those non-traditional markets, but people have embraced it, and it's done great for growing the game. I mean, it's yeah, you might not be able to have an outdoor rink down here, but listen, we're all just as enthusiastic about the sport as some of the bigger market fans, the major hockey market areas. We're kind of rabid in our own way here in these untraditional markets.
I feel like
I mean, you might be able to have a rink, but it'll be a swimming pool.
Oh yeah, that's taking a literal dive.
for you know how in Detroit they throw octopus on the ice when they're excited. Do you
Mm.
guys throw gators on the ice?
Oh dear.
Florida man, Florida. That would be the highlight for like the Iceman winning the Kelly Cup. Iceman win Kelly Cup. Florida man throws Gator on ice.
Gator's
the
like,
Pan-
what the shit am I doing here?
the Panthers throw rats. They have their rat thing that they do, but I have yet to see. I love that like Nashville throws the catfish because I feel like that could be a Florida thing. or even the octopus. I feel like to some extent, like we could be throwing fish on the ice, but the Panthers went with rats. So I don't know what happened with that. Picking of the
It
selection.
seems
I
more
just
like
feel
a New
like
York thing, right?
right, and like Nashville's very landlocked. So like, how did you even get a catfish in the arena? Like, I have questions.
I mean, I guess the Panthers thought it was safer to throw a rat than, an actual panther on the ice.
Well, they are endangered, so I do appreciate the eco-friendly nature.
They're being very
Consideration.
thoughtful of, yes. They're
Yes.
being very aware.
Very important.
Yeah, thanks for that, Avery, because I feel like sometimes, people look down on these smaller markets, and um like I've spent like majority of my life living in this area, and I remember when the Sharks came here. I remember there only being like a handful of rinks, and just recently with our AHL team moving over a few seasons back, they needed their own home, on top of the fact that a hockey on a like beer league and youth level has grown exponentially because of the presence of the Sharks. They've needed more ice. And I remember I went to a hockey camp some years ago, and I was chatting up with someone who I think was like outside of the Bay, like maybe like 2 hours north or whatever. And he was talking about like the closest rink to him was one that's like super far away from me, but he's like, I'm just like so jealous of, the Bay Area, because it might still be true now, but I think we have the most sheets of ice like on this side of the coast. And to me, that's like wild, because I don't really think about that. I just am like, oh my God, like I can't believe I have to play an 11 p.m. game. But like, it's like there's people who would love to play an 11 p.m. game, but it's just like, it's just not possible with what they have. So it's like, from the American standpoint, especially like on the West Coast, it's huge to have this growth in hockey, and even seen from like drafts and stuff. Like we've been seeing more people who are born in California, like they may have left later on to pursue, get better access to programs that are, still still developing here. Like they had to move to like Detroit or like to Minnesota or whatever to get to those more competitive programs. But it's just kind of like still surreal in a way to see someone who is drafted and whatever, and they were like originally born in this area.
Austin
So yeah, we're
Matthews.
here.
I still count it.
Yeah, him in a way. Yeah. Um, but I wanted to ask you about, so the first time that you came onto my radar is during your time on Yahoo Sports,
Yes.
and you were on a panel called Zone Time. Can you give us a brief summary of like how that kind of came about? And like it kind of stuck out to me because of the reason why we started this podcast. Like we wanted to see more diverse voices, and the representation, and people who were talking about hockey but then also not glossing over things that were happening in the sport, unlike people who were more mainstream. And they might bring it up, but they toe the line where they won't have the conversations that we want to have. So that's a big reason why you kind of came onto my radar, and specifically Zone Time. But I never really knew the history of it, and so if you could help us understand that a bit more.
Yeah. So Zone Time launched back in 2021. At the time, I was working with Yahoo Sports Canada, just doing more writing side. I was covering the Oilers, Jets, Canucks, Flames for them, and doing hockey culture pieces. And I got a email from my guy Julie McKenzie, who had mentioned, "Hey, I'm talking to Dan Tillman, who is head of Yahoo Sports Canada. We're thinking about launching a hockey panel show. It's gonna be more diverse." And I had a meeting with Dan over Zoom over what the vision was, who was gonna be involved. He mentioned to me it was gonna be Julian as the main host, Samantha Chang from the broadcast gonna be involved, who I known for a bit, and Justin Cuthbert, and Ref Issa and Omar Tic Tac Tomar, who are going to be the panelists. And Dan's vision was hockey. There's no real place, Dan thought, for people of color to really talk hockey on a weekly basis in Canada. It really didn't exist beyond a one-off show. There was nothing consistent, and Dan wanted to make that a reality on Yahoo. So we launched that during the bubble season, the 2020-2021 season, that weird regional season. We launched that show, and the goal was to talk about the talk about this week in NHL, other stories, but also to address how the culture is and how we can help change the culture. And it launched from being a weekly show that was only 8 minutes to eventually being a full hour long show that aired every single week. And I think the reason why we got into more than just, who scored this goal, how this game went, the fact we got into the issues in regards to race, homophobia, hockey culture, Hockey Canada's issues was because we saw, we saw other shows mainstream weren't getting into it. They were towing the line too much to, in some cases, protect their access, not shake the boat. And we saw it as we can't have a hockey show with how we look and our backgrounds and be like everybody else. We want to change the game, and that starts with us being honest about the fact that hockey is not a perfect sport and that hockey doesn't want to change for the better in many aspects. And it's unfortunate. So we felt this, if we can at least keep talking about these issues, maybe in some aspect we can change something and say, hey, we're not going to go away. We're going to talk about these issues as much as we're going to talk about the exploits of Connor McDavid on the ice or an Nathan McKinnon, because end of the day, this is all hockey. These are all topics in the sport. We're not going to just brush them aside and say, no, this isn't a part of the game. It is. As much as the powers that be like to say it's not, or, oh, it was a one-off thing, it's not a part of the culture. It is a part of the culture, because what we see with Hockey Canada's issues, with hazing in the CHL, this kind of stuff has been going on for decades. You can go back and read books about seeing issues with the hockey's culture back in the 70s and the 80s, and nothing has changed in large part. And two of these issues got brushed under the rug, and players were mistreated. And we really felt, you know what, no, we gotta shine a light on this to help move the game forward. If other people don't want to do it, we'll do that work to try and in some way make the game better for those after us.
Preach.
I love that. I love shaking the boat. We need more people that have. I mean, like that's the thing, right? Is like you said that some of the grotesque parts of the sport are embedded in the culture and have been around since forever. And I think the powers that be, the old boys club, I think that we often refer to when it comes to hockey, they would rather just pretend like they aren't there, like those things don't exist, or like you said, it's like a one-off thing. But the only way that we get that out of culture is if we draw awareness to it and we call out the fact that it needs to change. Like these are parts of the game that need to change, that kind of keep people, if it keeps the game from growing, when people hear those stories about hazing and Hockey Canada and everything else that it seems like with hockey culture these days. So I like shaking the boat. That's what we need. Ultimately, it takes more than one or two voices, right? It takes everybody to call attention to it so that we can make forward progress and we can have the sport ultimately reflect the version of it that we want to see. It's kind of like the one thing is like power is in our hands a little bit, right? Like we can shake the boat, we can cause good trouble, and we can hopefully that good trouble ends up with good results in the long run.
I mean, that's what this
Absolutely
podcast
true.
is all about, right? It's just we don't have the huge platform to be telling the whole world about it, but we're in our own little space here, being like, this we don't like this. Let's try to do something about it.
We're at least rocking the boat on Over the Glass.
A little bit.
Yeah.
We've got
we're
a
like
tiny
tapping
little
it.
paddle boat. We're making our way across the ocean. We'll get there eventually.
You know
I
what?
have thoughts.
I mean, and you know what? You're all doing a great job because this is what we needed. Because, I remember growing up, there weren't shows like Over the Glass 10, 15 years ago. They didn't exist. There was no platform to have people, for lack of a better term, let's be honest. Hockey in media, for lack of a better term, only had straight white males on camera or radio. That's all there was. You didn't see the diversity of people from different races, sexual orientations. It wasn't a thing. Now we're seeing people saying, hey, these people are important to have in the hockey media sphere talking about the game because their opinions matter as well too.
Yeah. We matter.
I think just the nuance and being that like outside of that target demographic, right? Like we can see things that I think people that have become blind or maybe they're willfully ignorant to it, like they dismiss it, and it's I feel like it's always good, like no matter what sort of group or culture or whatever it is, like you need people that will provide that perspective that differs from everybody else. I feel like sometimes that's the only way to draw attention to the things that really need change, is if you have that outside, because it's kind of like Febreze, what they were like, you're nose blind to it. It's kind of like these people, like you either choose in willful ignorance or you've just gotten so accustomed to it that you're like, that's a non-issue. But it's like, no, these are big issues, and we need people to want to call them out and want to provide the perspective that says, hey, this needs to change. Like, this isn't okay. Well, what are we doing?
Did you just call complacent people Febreze?
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
That's good. That's good, dude.
That's gonna be the title of this episode. Complacent people are Febreze.
They don't have to be a
all
fun
of that.
scent.
All of that.
No, it's gotta be a really annoying one.
I'm definitely
It's
allergic
one
to
where
lavender,
they think it's
so.
okay, but you're just like, that smell is off. What is that?
This is
Not
still
healthy.
Febreze.
It's making it worse.
It's not Febreze at all.
Yeah, like that's also why we like to bring on just like everyday folks as well, because we feel, if you've got thoughts that I feel like most mainstream platforms are, unless you're doing something like exponentially amazing that they feel like, oh, this will bring in like the views and the downloads, and to some extent, like, I sort of get it, but then also it's like one of the most frustrating things about how at the end of the day it's kind of like our experiences are sort of used in like a capitalistic marketing sort of fashion. But I don't feel like someone needs to be doing something extraordinary to be able to come on here and just hang out and share their thoughts. I always love having different perspectives, different like backgrounds and everything like that. Like, I just feel like it makes our conversations more impactful. And, I feel like that helps to continue to help us grow, because it's not like we all have our different experiences, but maybe we might have a conversation down the line where you have that like light bulb moment where you're like, oh wow, like I didn't realize that was happening, or maybe we come to a intersection where we didn't realize that we were all experiencing that sort of thing. And I feel like those mainstream platforms sometimes, where they're just kind of keeping steady, just providing the news and briefly highlighting on something that might be of interest to someone, but they're really not doing too much to shift this sport in the direction that we want it to go. And just with all of us here today, like there's a lot of love for this sport. And all of that to say that I was really sad to see that Zone Time, came to an end. And in addition, also, Game Over kind of came to an end for you as well. But I do want to kind of ask about your time over Game Over. And then I have also been sort of seeing some chatter about there might be a potential new home for Game Over. So can you maybe give us a little insight about how Game Over kind of came about for you? Like in like a month or so ago, we had Lauren on, and she's a trip. She's so fun. She told us about her experience, but she was kind of like, "Oh, I just really love the Leafs." I'm like, I wouldn't like she kind of felt like, oh, there's no way I could get this role. But as somebody who's kind of like been sort of in this, you've been talking about sports on your own platform. Like, how did that experience come about for you?
So I was actually Andrew Berkshire reached out to me after the 2022 during 2022 playoffs about coming on and launching Game Over Edmonton. But unfortunately, during that time, I couldn't make that happen during the 2022 playoffs about launching Game Over Edmonton. So fast forward a year later, SDPN embarks on launching the proper full channel of Game Over shows all across Canada. And again, Andrew came back, and it worked better for me to at the time join and be a part of Game Over and Game Over Edmonton, working with Zach and Dennis, my co-hosts, and doing a post-game show with those guys. I thought that was amazing. Again, I never met Zach and Dennis before, but the chemistry between the three of us was instantaneous, breaking down Oiler games, a lot of laughs, a lot of comments, and watching Game Over, being a part of Game Over. Zach and Dennis are very intense. I know during the Edmonton LA series last summer, it was funny because even though that series was hectic and gave all of us gray hairs, seeing the reaction of fans coming in and interacting with us was a joy. Even be it Oilers fans, be it King fans. I know one of our shows, the infamous Gabe Velarde goal in which he hit the puck with the high stick. That puck moved. That was a high stick goal. You can't tell me otherwise. That was a high stick goal on Gabe Velarde's part. We had about 9,000 live views. And it was funny because just seeing the banter between Oilers fans and King fans back and forth was amazing. But I love the aspect of doing a live post game show. I really love talking to those guys, and it was a show I enjoyed my time. And being a part of the SDPN brand, you see how big the pull is because I would go to Orla games. I would come in front of the press box. I would get stopped by people, like random fans who knew Steve and who followed him to Game Over. So that was a trip, being noticed by regular fans at Orla games on the street who knew the Steve Dangle brand and followed Game Over. That was interesting, to say the least, to get noticed in public like that from the show. And you mentioned the revival of Game Over. So we have been talking to different companies about the idea of a Game Over revival. There's no firm timeline yet, but I know Andrew wants to bring it back. It's Andrew's baby. He owns the IP for Game Over, so he owns all the intellectual property to Game Over. So we're trying to find a proper place to revive it. We're not sure yet exactly. There's been discussions, but we do want to find a way to bring it back. If not for the playoffs here this season, we're definitely going to try to find a way to bring it back. Hopefully, fingers crossed for next season, but still to be determined. Still a lot to sort through, but the show is not dead fully just quite yet.
It's just hibernating somewhere.
Exact. Great word to put out. Yeah, out to hibernating. It's in a cryogenic state right now.
It's waiting for its moment. All right, Drew.
All right.
You can ask your questions.
Drew, do
now.
you want to ask him anything about the other sports?
Yeah, Avery. I was just because I just said, or just you were just talking about being with the hockey news and all the stuff that you've gotten into. But you're obviously just a big sports guy in general.
Yeah.
So I mean, I am too. Like hockey is my bread and butter, but I love just being competitive, any type of competition. So I was just curious if there was a sport maybe that's not hockey that you enjoy covering or talking about, writing about, anything that kind of similar passion as hockey. And if you have like any maybe favorite city or favorite venue, any place that you visited that like really stands out as one of your favorite places you've reported from.
Honestly, the sport I first grew up playing was basketball, so I've done a lot of stuff covering basketball. I covered the Canadian Elite Basketball League here in Edmonton, and I've done stuff covering the senior men's basketball team and women's national team. I've done a lot of stuff. I've done a lot of one-on-ones, interviewing Kia Nurse. I've interviewed her quite a few times, and for me, basketball is a sport which I grew up a major fan of. I still watch a lot of Raptor games, and actually, my first media dream when I was a little kid wasn't it was hockey was in there, but my first real media dream was to be a Lakers broadcaster because I grew up watching Laker games on satellite TV, and I grew up I might be 31 years old, but people are surprised when I tell them my first broadcasting idol was Chick Hearn. I loved listening to Chick Hearn call Laker games, his catchphrases, and I used them when I called basketball games at University up here. I thought he was an innovator with what he would do calling Laker games. Yeah, so my first dream was to be a Lakers broadcaster like Chick Hearn when he called games back in the day. But basketball is what I followed the most. I've done stuff covering rugby league, and actually got me a TV show in the UK talking about a team called the Toronto Wolfpack who played, and they were a team owned by an Australian billionaire. They played rugby in Toronto in the UK's professional leagues. How they do that? He would spend his own money to fly his team to play teams in the UK, and he would pay for the UK teams to play his teams in Toronto.
Wow.
So it was an expensive venture to have a Toronto-based rugby team playing in a UK league. So I would cover that. I covered that. I got a TV show out of that on Sky Sports. But no, basketball and rugby were two of my favorite sports to cover that were not hockey. But I always said to myself, and this is a thing that my mom told me when I get started media. My mom told me many years ago, don't just tie yourself to one sport. Be an asset to as many people as possible, because if you can go out and talk hockey, talk basketball, talk baseball, talk football, you'll become valuable. I know it's more important to, hone in on one thing, but I've said to myself, if I can go to a different network or go to a different platform and jump on a hockey broadcast and then jump on a football broadcast and then talk soccer, how am I not more valuable to anyone if I can have that versatility?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I love that. That's like first of all, rugby is criminally underrated. Like, especially here in North America, I love that sport. It's like, it's just as tough as hockey to me, but with absolutely nothing protecting those guys. But yeah, I love that though. I love like that, just the vast array of like you said, like don't attach yourself to just one sport. And like, that's the reason why I love to write, is because as much as I love hockey,
Hmm.
I also love so many other sports, and it kind of gives me that medium, that content medium, to combine it all and not have to like pigeonhole myself into one thing that
Hmm.
I love to write about or just love to partake in. So I was curious because it looks like you've done so much like fun stuff to covering different sports, talking about different things. As I had to pick your brain a little bit.
No, of course.
Avery, do you have a favorite football team?
Nope.
Favorite football team? I do, and it is the Green Bay Packers. That's my team. I'm a big Green Bay
No.
guy. I know the Bay Area's not going to go very well with the.
Yeah, I was curious. What about baseball?
This is like I'm not curious no more.
No, take it back. I don't want to.
Baseball. I'm a Toronto Blue Jays guy. That's been my team, but I'm also a quasi follower of the LA Dodgers because my buddy Joe Kelly plays for the
You're here
Dodgers.
just to break our hearts, honestly. What is this? Oh, well, I guess you follow the Lakers too. Yeah.
I guess. Drew, tell us about this Alaska thing you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, this was just something crazy, and I didn't know if you guys had seen it or had caught wind of it, or if it like come across your radar as well, Avery. Arizona
Mm.
State versus Alaska. I believe it was Alaska Fairbanks. College
Yes.
hockey Friday night. I seen it. It was like suggested in my YouTube algorithm, and it caught my attention. It was like crazy, rare college fight or whatever. And I was like, all right, let's see this. And I got like through the first 3 minutes of it, and the thing that really like I was like, okay, this was a wild spectacle. Was it turns into chaos. There's what 3 or 4 goals scored within like a minute and a half. It turns into chaos, and then at one point in time, there's like 6 players in the box, and the ref just comes out and he's like, "Yeah, that's all coincidental. There's a 2 minute major for 2 minute minor for roughing. Like that's the only thing we're gonna worry about announcing to the people." It's just crazy. Like if you guys, all of our listeners out there, if you guys can find it, go find the clip and watch it. It's like a 5-6 minute long clip. It is the most ridiculous end I think I've ever seen to a college hockey game. At least in recent times, I don't know if I've seen one quite this get this wild. It turns into just a full on like Arizona State gets they tie it up, it's 1-1, and then all of a sudden Fairbanks responds, scores another 2 quick goals, and then it just turns into full chaos, just
Yeah.
full tilt. They end up that like it's like 11 seconds left, and they're just like, it's over. Everybody off the ice.
So I watched it before we hopped on, and everything happens within the last 3 minutes of the game.
Yes.
So it's also condensed. And my favorite part was once the brawl actually starts like breaking out, there was like 2 isolated players, and one of the refs is trying to pull them apart, and they're just going at it, and they basically like fling the ref away. He just falls on the ice. He looks like a doll out there. It's
That was
ridiculous.
like the craziest thing is like those 2 dudes that are out there, like, because it ends up like the one dude's just like stripped down to like his like shoulder pads. Those 2 dudes came out of the penalty box to engage in like center ice old school fisticuffs. Like, I'm like, this is wild. We went from like college hockey to like this looks very close to like WWE Friday night, like punishment in a cage or whatever they call
On
it these
ice.
days. Yeah.
Look, my opinion with the fighting in this sport has kind of like gone a little south over the years, but these sort of moments are still what I live for.
Yeah.
Like
Chaos.
when there's anything related to like, oh, the code, you need to drop the gloves, I go, oh, but pure chaos. I'm here for it.
Sometimes you just have to have that, like we get just abandon all code and sling the ref off at center ice so you can do whatever you need to do. Listen, I thought it was. I actually ended up sharing it with a couple times and like went back and rewatched it because I was like, this is wild. This is where is this good chaos?
Yeah, I saw it too, and just knowing that, I just knowing the NCAA, that is rare, incredibly rare for NCAA hockey to have that. I mean, you might get a fight in NCAA hockey once every couple of years. You don't get that. You
Yeah.
don't get a full-on line brawl and mayhem in NCAA. That is unheard of to happen.
It's all good fun. All good fun. That's what when it's turned into that full like Donnybrook. Everybody's getting involved in the corner. Center ice. They're like they came out of the box. These 2 dudes at center ice. I'm like, what? This is. Are we sure this is still college? Like we're not watching like an ECHL game because it had a very very big double A vibes to it. Those last 3 minutes.
I hope there were a lot of people who just came as like my first hockey game and got to witness all of that. It's always fun to bring people who have never watched a hockey game and then they're like, you can do this out on the ice? Like what is going on? And I'm just like, I love this.
That's how I got into the sport. I was like, what? That's allowed? It's all fun.
All right, moving on to the Green Men. I saw this briefly, but You need to explain this, Drew.
You don't know about the Green Men, or you just
Yeah,
I know of Green Men, but I don't know specifically the Green Men as they're related to the Canucks.
what? Okay,
these aren't the tiny green men that may have visited you from another world, Jay. These are real men in green skin suits.
Drew, I thought we agreed that we would talk about that.
I'm so sorry. I forgot you shared that with me in confidence, and I just
putting out my personal stories out there. Jeez, without my consent.
well, these are different green men than what Jay has had personal experience with us. Back in forever ago, it's been like 8 years since the Green Men have been in Rogers Arena. They got a big reputation around them, especially during the President's Trophy years and the Stanley Cup run in 2011. They dress in green skin suits, get in there and give the guys in the penalty box a couple, some razzle dazzle. Last night, for the first time in 8 years, the Green Men were back at Rogers Arena, and it was such a beautiful moment because we finally snapped that losing skid that kind of had me panicking as a traumatized Canucks fan. 3-2, beat Boston in overtime, and then the Green Men are there. Like, what perfect little, like, just a nice little return ecosystem for the Green Men to come back in. And they were throwing waffles we're throwing waffles around JVR and doing all the things they do up near the penalty box glass. They're like an unofficial mascot for the Canucks. There was talk like back in the day that they had been like banned or removed or whatever. Though they just retired, and then like I think it was maybe a month or so ago we'd seen something. There was something on Twitter, and it was like, "What if the Green Men remade an appearance?" And I was like, "In a perfect world, we get that." And then lo and behold, we got that perfect world last night when we played Boston and for our first game back home, because it was fun to see those guys back in RA for sure.
yeah, I saw a clip of who was it, Van Riemsdyk in the penalty box, and
Yeah.
they're just taunting him, and he's trying so hard not to laugh. It's all good fun.
That's the clip that I saw, and I was like, I don't understand what's going on.
It was like I can't remember who like the player in the box was, but I know way back in the day, like they had like a cardboard cutout. I think it was like of like Ryan Kessler that they had up at the penalty box like glass. It was the stuff that the Green Men did back in the day, doing handstands and stuff up against the penalty box. Just good fun, just good ways
They're
to like
just
razzle
trolls.
guys.
They're like physical
Yes.
trolls.
Yep.
There's a Jay. I'll have to send you like a Green Men greatest hits clip.
Compilation.
Yes, yeah, for sure.
The greatest hits from the Green Men.
The greatest troll jobs from like everybody's favorite trolls.
Okay, I want to end on, because I do remember what I wanted to ask way back when we were talking about the Oilers, and then I thought it would be an interesting question to ask from another person's perspective. When Erik Karlsson was that whole friggin' season where no one could shut up about, oh, is Erik Karlsson getting traded? Oh, look what Erik Karlsson did today. Is he getting traded? It's like, shut up. Just shut up. Like, we know he's going to go, and I'm fine if he leaves, but the Sharks are doing some other stuff right now. Like, you maybe talk about like those other stuff too, instead of Erik Karlsson this, Erik Karlsson that. Around the time of the trade deadline last season, there was some chatter about the Oilers maybe sniffing around, considering picking up Karlsson. So my question to you would be, what were your thoughts if that were to not happen? And do you want anything from the Sharks right now?
Do we have anything to offer?
The whole roster's on roll.
I'm asking from his perspective, okay? I know that we're wholesale.
I'm sorry.
But I'm just curious to know from someone else's perspective, a non-Sharks fan perspective.
You know, honestly, I thought for a while Mackenzie Blackwood was going to be in play going to Edmonton. I thought that was going to happen because I know, I think it was back in, I think, early November-ish. Mike Greer was in Rogers Place. And Twitter, I tweeted out, hey, Sharks, yeah, Mike Greer is here in Edmonton. And my Twitter just went ballistic. I was just like, 100 notifications. Oh, why is Mike Greer in Edmonton? Oh, who's
breaking news.
I got nothing else going on.
my Twitter wouldn't stop going off for at least a couple of hours. I saw insiders were tweeting at me, "Oh, you saw Greer? Hey, yeah, I see my Greer." Like people were wondering what was happening with him in Edmonton, and you never know. There could still be something in play to upgrade the goaltending. I do think that for Edmonton, the bigger thing to address right now is forward and defenseman. But I wouldn't rule out just quite yet the idea of a trade to get Mackenzie Blackwood to Edmonton. His name has been rumored around for quite a bit. Now, the priority might have changed over the past couple of months here. But yeah, I definitely think that if it comes down to it, possibly a goaltending move could be made between the Sharks and the Oilers. Possibly.
And my final question is, if it could happen, it
Yes.
probably wouldn't. What would you want off of the Vancouver Canucks? If you had free reign to just come in and grab a player and no one would be able to do anything.
Listen, we have a guy, you'll really enjoy him in Edmonton. He's 6'7".
No,
falls over every day.
You don't get to sell Drew. He gets to pick.
He gets to come in and take anyone he wants.
And clearly he would like to have Tyler Myers. I'm just saying. I mean, like, cream of the crop, Avery. Like, just he comes with his own enclosure, his own chaos trap.
Terrible salesman.
Enclosure.
You know what I was?
He may occasionally forget what team he's playing on.
You know what I would say that, Drew? I would say, oh, cool, Tyler Myers. Oh, you know what I'll take instead? That young Swedish boy, Elias Pettersson. You're coming to Alberta.
But which one? You have to be specific now.
Right,
That's
right.
right.
Which one?
The
Oh,
Which one?
no.
The forward Elias Pettersson. The forward.
It's like, we have a couple. We could just, they're all like blonde-haired, blue-eyed Swedes. We'll just swap them out. They'll never know in Edmonton. They'll never know. You said Petey. That's the one you got. I don't know what you were asking for.
Oh, good
That
times.
reaction was priceless. That should be the thumbnail.
I was so shook
Gasp.
when Jay asked that question. I was like,
That was funny.
Ah.
how could you?
It's all hypothetical. I know no one wants to grab anyone off of the Sharks. So,
I feel like your
just want
Sharks.
to have.
I feel like that question wasn't hypothetical though. You're just like, we're having a sale. Come on down.
I mean, we are for sale. Whether or not it's actually going to happen is the more hypothetical part. Do we have any closing thoughts?
I have one last
Before
question because
Okay.
Avery, you mentioned that you went to broadcasting school, right? Is that what it's called? Do you have a broadcasting voice? Do you have a specific voice you speak in when you're doing broadcasting stuff?
I do not know. What you see is what you get. This is the Avery on air. This is the Avery off air voice. I couldn't if I tried. It would be. I know people have said to me, "Oh, you need a broadcasting voice. You need to sound like a deep broadcaster." Like I can't pull it off. It was not. I'm the high pitched dude. That's my trademark. I'm sticking with that voice.
But Avery, I feel like your voice is like very like naturally broadcast. Like you remind me of like the Iceman's, their PR guy is the same way. Like when he talks, I'm like, Alex, this isn't a play-by-play. Like we can just speak regular. But that is him speaking regular.
That's
I don't
funny.
know what you're talking about.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Avery, for coming on today and having a chat with us and hanging out. Really great time. We're looking forward to seeing the revival of Game Over.
Yes.
We're hoping it'll happen, and we're sending you all the great vibes. Yeah, and as always, I am your host, Jay.
I'm co-host Nessa.
I'm co-host Drew.
And this was Avery. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks.
It was a blast. Anytime, gang.
Thank you. All right.
See you next
Take
week.
care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.